we have time for questions? We should have lunch we should have had lunch now. So we have 10 minutes for questions. I'd just like to make one short comment, and that is that I was a member of the board of the VREF when the board decided to fund this project. And I think one of the main reasons why we decided to do that was exactly this distinction between what's inside and what's outside the iron triangle. What is inside and what is outside the iron triangle. Meaning that outside the iron triangle, all the other considerations which aren't covered by the usual cost-benefit analysis. And how important are those aspects? In what kinds of projects are they? So what makes a difference between those projects that you can essentially define within terms of the iron triangle, simple transport projects, and those which you cannot define within those triangles. And I think we've come a long way of understanding better how this distinction, but we still we're still grasping and thinking about how to actually deal with these larger projects, the larger megaprojects. So now, time for question. Who will start? Dinesh, and then Elliot, and then
Dinesh Mohan, I have a very short but I don't know what kind of a question, but Professor John Adams. I unfortunately agree with almost everything implied and said. The question I have is that is our unhappiness with what's happened and happening to do with our age, or is it more serious?
Well, I would like to think it's more serious. Harry mentioned that I was on the original board of directors of Friends of the Earth all those years ago. We certainly got some things very, very wrong. I remember in the mid-70s climbing on the bandwagon saying, we're running out of energy. And those forecasts have been well and truly fracked. I worried then about I did my one and only climatology course back in the Ice Age, when our professor urged us to be terribly concerned about the impending Ice Age. And then suddenly it changed. Then, at that point, I realized how simplistic were the climatic models that were being used to make these forecasts. That was the forecasting problem again. And now, we've had 16 years of increasing CO2 and low global warming. And so anxieties are creeping back in about whether the global warming forecasts are right. And so we're all over the shop in terms of being able to anticipate the future. But the forecasting problem that defeats me, which is why I ended on a question and not an answer. I would love to join Keynes and be one of the lilies in the field, but I cannot get my head round how we get from here to there. Every government in the world, so far as I'm aware, Harry said we need a strategy. Every government in the world is trying to pursue a growth strategy.
there are 5 people on the side.
And there's lunch.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, very good.
Now, short questions and short answers. First comes Elliot, and then comes William.
My question is to Harry. Listening to Harry, I begin to get the impression that the challenge is you're preaching and looking at research and saying there's a rationality that's missing from this, that's more comprehensive. And I keep thinking, but you're assuming there's if only they knew the truth, they would change, and that it may very well be that this is just a sandbox for academics to play in, and we can kind of rearrange all these pieces But the question becomes, so what? It sounds to me like it's like an issue in power, not an issue in rationality. That's my question.
I think we'll take one more question and then you can Willem.
Okay, listening to Harry, I got a reflection in this sense that Harry was very critical in his conclusions. I endorsed it as member of the research group on these mega projects. But at the same time, I was thinking more than 65% of the projects, more than 65% of the projects are rail projects. Actually, you might say a triumph of environmentalism. It was a triumph that we selected rail projects. So you would say, if it's efficient done, it's a success for the environment. But actually, we did not conclude this. So what is the role of these type of rail projects in environmental and human-friendly environment? This is a question I would like to ask to John, because you were talking about this increasing mobility. Is this rail increasing on mega rail projects? Is it a set or a problem?
Eric, 2 questions.
I kind of like, John, and I'm not ducking it because I'm going to be here around for the rest of the day. I'd like John to have more time. Would you mind?
But you should answer Edith's question.
I think Edith's question, as is always, it is very much to the point. And I know I'm supposed to say I don't know. I mean, but the truth of the matter is, the reason why the theme is politics, megaprojects, politics and implicit risk. And incidentally, at Ethan's point, I was going to put the media in as well, but I just would have taken everyone too far. But I totally agree with you. This idea of us being in a sandbox is criminal. We actually have to sort of open up the knowledge gaps that exist and then take some proactive action to deal with it however best we can. I want to set this point in time, and it needs to be in partnership with the private sector. But there needs to be a different perception. The myth, and I suppose there's a link here with John's, the myth of the ever mobile society, or the myth that mega projects can be judged success or failures by these narrow iron triangle, has to be stopped, and we need to move on. How is the next phase, or the next action?
I interpret Edith's question and say, it's in a sense, it's not a myth, it's the choice to define as within the iron triangle. And the reason for the choice is politics. But that's a discussion for lunch.
Yeah.
Now, John, would you like to comment on Willem's?
Well, just briefly, is it power or rationality? I think it's power.
Yeah.
The people who are making these enormous bonuses while the rest of the world gets poorer, I don't think they're irrational. I think they know exactly what they're doing. The increase in rail projects. I didn't have time to develop what was wrong with the rail forecast on my first diagram, because rail use has gone up in percentage terms quite dramatically. In passenger mile terms compared to car and air, it's still fairly significant. And most of it is about going further and faster. I struggle to see what is environmentally benign about high-speed rail.
Okay, now,
socially benign.
Sorry, we're running out of time, so I take the ones on the list. You up there, yes.
Hello, it's Neil McNevin here. I'm a guest. I do a visiting lectureship for UCL, and Harry, I was very pleased to listen to you lecture, having you listened to me lecture a number of times. And I've just got a couple of observations and one question. Having had the privilege of working on the Olympic Delivery Authority, or for the Olympic Delivery Authority, I just want to put it on the record as a mega project with social environmental impacts and political leadership, that the project does have a learning legacy website, and all the matters that have been learnt on that programme are available to the general public and obviously academics. The address is learninglegacy.independent.gov.uk, and while the questions were up, I'll just quickly check that on my BlackBerry. I think the privatisation of knowledge and the passing of the baton is an extremely important matter. I have indeed moved from the public sector to the private sector, to the public sector to the private sector, and I'm cross-fertilising with some of the experiences that I've had. I've had experience on the Channel Tunnel rail link, as you know, and in terms of the matters that came up, I just wonder whether the lessons that we are learning, we're just not able to communicate. And it goes back to my colleague talking about the media. The media in the UK, and it'd be interesting to hear from colleagues across the world here today, sensationalise negative stories. Whether that's negative planning disasters, as Sabina Hall had earlier. But I think if we can get the media to be more positive and talk about behavioural changes, which indeed I think was the major success of the Olympics, whether you love it or loathe it, as it is indicated by Ken Livingstone, the aspiration of public transport orientated visitor patronage was successful. It was approximately 95% of all people came to the Games by public transport. When we put that out in 2003, that was not considered possible.
Okay, fine, thanks. Now I missed someone on the fourth. No, it actually wasn't you, it was you down here. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, Luca Bertolini, University of Amsterdam. Let us assume that John is right, at least in the sense that the risk he's talking about are real. Then I would say that we still have not made the link, not even within the mega project, between that debate, the limits to growth debate, and the mega projects world. So my question now is just in this context to ask both John and Harry to react to each other's presentations. How do you? What was your reaction when you heard the other talk?
And the last question is very short. There. And I'm sorry that I have to cut it short because of that. That's the way.
Okay, hi, my name is Mary Polk. I'm from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. I was just interested in hearing what your, how receptive are policymakers and bureaucrats to the results that you came up with, because I know you say that they weren't interested in perhaps evaluating these projects, but these are really interesting results and they would be really helpful for them. And for example, have you gone back to the respondents and talked to them? Have they been open to it? How have you kind of, what kind of feedback loops have you had? Yeah, with your mega project results.
Harry?
Let me start with you. Lucas, very pertinent question that I know that Nick has raised it before. We started off with this research project to find out how things were done. We hope that the lessons from what we learned would then provide a platform for how we respond. And one of the things that we found was that the issue of sustainable development, whether defined in the way that John has presented in terms of changes of excessive mobility, whatever, were not addressed. So that is, it may not have been addressed because of the time we were doing the time of the project, but I think that's not the case. So the answer is that these projects need to be looked at. And as you know, I think that the next challenge with mega projects is retrofitting existing projects to the sustainable development challenges of the kind that John and Nick and others are raising. So now we know what we've learned, we should use that, if we agree with the conclusions, as a platform for then saying, well, how do we retrofit our existing, and how do we appraise differently? And we have come up, I won't go into details now, we have come up with a methodology for that in terms of how to better appraise more comprehensively projects.
And there is a question.
We have not gone back to partners, but it's an interesting question. I think we've been invited to the table. We now are invited to the European Investment Bank and to the Treasury. I think that we've been invited to the table, but I'm not entirely sure we could eat all the meal.
Okay, thank you very much.